Hello and welcome to the end of season party on the work experience. So tonight we have with us the amazing female teachers who have all brought you lessons throughout the series, throughout the season. And so we have, in no particular order, just how I can see everyone on my screen, we have Nicola Humber, who talked to you about cycles, Polly Hearsey, who talked to you about tapping into your essence, and Anne-Marie, who did rapid transformational therapy. Tonia, oh, where's she gone? There we go, swapped order.
It kicked me out.
Tonia G, who talked to us about getting into your financial flow, finding your financial freedom, and Anne-Marie Pereira, who gave, have I done you, Anne-Marie? It's all moved around. And Maria Coulter, who was with us at the end of the season, who closed us down with an amazing session all about your vision and putting these lessons and your plans into action, into the thing that you, the one thing that would make the biggest difference for you right now. So today we're all going to be talking to you around, so the idea of the fact that we started this group with the intention to really help women reframe their ideas around work. Each of the teachers has their own niche, their own specialism, and had a unique message to share with you. But now what comes next? And we briefly touched on this in Maria's session in terms of, well, now you've got to put things into action. But all of us know from our own journeys that there's a lot of lessons we've learned along the way. And just before we started, Polly was talking about how we so often hear a lesson, think we've learned it, and then come back for another round of it later on at some point. So Polly, perhaps you could kick us off with a little bit of thought around that.
Yeah, I think coming back to Nicola's cyclical explanation of our cyclical natures, the same is very much true of how we process and learn. So there are many layers to what we experience. So what you've experienced over the last 8 weeks, it will have uncovered things, it would have allowed you to explore different aspects of yourself, you would have learned different things about yourself. And you'd be absolutely thrilled that you've done that. You may be a little bit overwhelmed by the fact that you've done that, but you will have moved through things and think, well, I've nailed that, I've done that. But I think we can all testify to the fact that you've never nailed it, because we are cyclical and there are layers to us, and we will come back, you will come back to the same lessons. So I have to say, I think it'd be so worth to hold on to a lot of these exercises, because there's something that you can come back to. Maybe it might be in 3 months' time, it might be in 3 years' time, but you'll go through similar experiences when you learn more about yourself and what you're capable of doing. It's not a one and done. It's definitely cyclical. Oh, Ollie, you're muted.
Forgot that I muted myself. I was just about to say, Nicola, I can see you nodding away. What was sparking for you there?
Well, like following on from what Polly just said, you know, obviously I was talking about cycles and our cyclical nature in my session, but I very much think about work like this as a spiral, like we spiral round and we keep coming back to the same kind of things, but we're coming from a slightly different perspective. So if we think about it as a spiral, so if something that you thought that you'd kind of nailed and you dealt with comes up again, rather than kind of judging yourself or making yourself wrong, it's like, oh, why is this coming up again? If we think about it as a spiral, that can be really powerful, because it's like, okay, this is coming up again, but actually I'm a different person to the first time that I experienced it, and I am seeing it from this different perspective. It is like there's all these different layers. And I also think, you know, with work like we've been doing here in the work experience, like sometimes something might land from that, you know, weeks or months, or as Polly said, even years later, kind of a bit of an awareness might drop in. So the process is certainly not complete now.
Absolutely. And Anne-Marie, I know in your work, it's all about getting us out of those old patterns that keep us stuck. So what's your perspective around what do you see happen with your clients, and what advice would you share with people?
Well, I usually say that we are all work of art in progress, right? And I think we feel all like this, exactly the same. So we work on something, but then working with other people also show us we still have some things to work on. So that happens to me as well. Sometimes I work with a client and I'm like, oh, this is so much resonating with me. It means I also have to work out something around that. So a lot of the times we don't even have a sense that we need to work on something, but as we go along, you know, as we do our path, and then we find out that there are still things to work on, and it's going to be like this forever. So, and that's the good thing about it as well, because it's never-ending story. We're always getting better and better and better, and sometimes it's a bit harder, sometimes it's easier. And the good thing also is to see that there's so many people that, you know, have chosen to help also around that. So as we master something, then we can help somebody else master it as well. So that's the thing. It's never ending story.
And I just want to point out as well, like, sometimes it can seem a bit negative when you hear people saying like, oh, you know, you've always got things to work on and so on and so on. And you think, oh God, what am I letting myself in for? But that pattern of always having things come up is because when you're continually expanding who you are, what you think you're capable of, what you're doing, it's natural that there is always going to be something new to work on. It's a sign that you're living life to the full. It's not a sign that you've got loads of problems. It's not a sign that you're this terrible person with all of these issues, you know. And we all go through things in varying degrees at different points in life. So don't necessarily, if you're listening, don't necessarily think, oh, you know, this is all down and negative. It's not. It's a real sign that you're starting to thrive and open yourself up to thriving rather than just surviving or being in your victim story. And
it takes courage, because you could just choose not to look at it, right? I could just do that. Then it takes a lot of courage as well to look yourself into the mirror and say, okay, I'm really doing badly here. I need to do something about it. And that's why I usually say, like, be very proud of wanting to get better and wanting to work on it, because not everybody is ready for that. Not everybody chooses the hard way of really like questioning yourself and, you know, and wanting to do better. So it's really, I think we should be proud of that more than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And Tonia, I could see you nodding your head a lot as Anne-Marie spoke. What were you thinking of at that point?
Just how important the story is, and how our narrative is really what we create in our lives. So always staying in the knowing of that, whether it's positive or negative, and just being in the knowing is what allows us to create everything. And, you know, that's why even, you know, people talk about money and everything else, but it doesn't matter. It's just in anything, what our minds say and what's running in the background is always what it is that we're creating. And especially when we are trying to expand and go forward, we are either going to get the things that we want or the things that are standing in our way. So all things are gifts. It's just the way that we choose to look at them. So I think it's just so important. And it's from what Polly said to what Nicola said to what Anne-Marie said. And it's so cool how everything is just a building block of, yeah, they're all building blocks, and it is spiral and cyclical, because it could seem as if you've already conquered this thing that comes up. I'm going to use money because that's what I do. Like, oh, I thought I conquered this belief, but that's not how it works. It's always through the spiral and through the lens of seeing it from a different perspective, so that we could uncover more of ourselves, so that we could grow into this bigger person. And that's where like the freedom comes in. And so, you know, everyone who's here in the work experience, they're trying to move forward into a new way of being. And so when there is that, you're going to reach a lot of resistance, but just realize the story that's running, and like, well, you are allowed to create your narrative. And like, that is the one thing we do get to control, is how we view and choose to view the situation and the circumstances at hand.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Nicola works a lot with story, being an author and I was going to say owner, I'm not sure what the right, and creator of the Unbound Press. But also what comes to mind as I listen to you say that, Tonia, is I think we all have three stories. We have our victim story, we have our survival story, and then we have our great story. And it takes so much to reach that great story. Like the people who are living their great life, if you go talk to them, they'll all say, you would never believe what it took for me to live my great story, rather than just my survival story, which is like, hey, I'm free, I'm doing my thing, but I've still got all these blocks. Whereas the great story is moving with a little bit more ease into those new challenges and not falling into the trap of playing the victim. And playing the victim doesn't mean you're deliberately doing that or you're doing anything wrong, but it does mean giving away your power, not empowering yourself. So Maria, we haven't heard from you. Can I bring you in? Unmute. There we go.
Oh, you've
I've done
unmuted
it.
me. Great, thank you. Yeah, one of the things that sprung to mind when just listening to what everybody was saying, and it reminded me of an exercise that I did when I was training to be a coach. And it was, I think it was called the chairs exercise. And we had a brief conversation before we came on about what would you potentially sort of tell yourself like sort of 5 or 10 years ago or something like that, or if you transported yourself to the future now and looked back on who you are now, like what would you tell yourself? And I remember sort of doing this exercise, and it was basically looking at something that you wanted to be different. And one of the bits of the exercise was like, what would happen if you didn't make the change, if you didn't do what you wanted to do? And I think that's a really powerful question. Like if you transport yourself into the future and you look at where you want to be, and then you think, well, what if I don't do this? Then I think that's something to think about starting to make the changes. And also what sprung to mind to me as well, it's like you kind of it's different, it is different layers, but it's different levels as well, because like it is incremental, or it can be. So like you sort of make changes based on like the next thing that you want to do. So I guess it goes back to the one thing exercise that I was talking about last week. If you think about, well, if I want to do this in a year's time, like what do I need to be doing in 6 months time or a month's time? Like where do I need to be? And that kind of gives you an idea of who you need to be as well. Like how do you start to kind of condition yourself for success and condition yourself to sort of to do the things that you want to do, and get to where you want to be? Like what do you need to learn? Like what do you need to, who do you need to speak to, who do you need to surround yourself with? I think the journey that we've all been on, like we've had to get out of our comfort zones. I know me personally, you feel like you're permanently out of your comfort zone sometimes, but you just you do it because you it's part of the stretch. It's continuously sort of stretching yourself to sort of bust through the layers, I guess, if that makes sense.
I love that phrase, bust through the layers. So a couple of things have come up for me as everyone's been talking. There's a comment in the group actually about how so many people turn to medication first nowadays to deal with their issues. And for me personally, I think, especially coming from a very engineering background, as much as I've been into yoga for years and meditation, one of the great struggles for me personally has been learning to listen to myself more. And with that, I would say it's very much intrinsically tied with using your intuition. So just visually, if you think using your intuition has been a major part of your journey and your story, can you all just raise your hands so everyone can see? Okay, 6 out of 6. Great. And I'd love for each of you to share something just about what was your lesson or what was your blocker that stopped you from using your intuition. and how did you overcome it? Because for me, like with all these things, it's a work in progress. But for me, I was holding on to a lot of beliefs around, you know, as an engineer, there was certain ways to be and behave that were acceptable. And it's almost like intuition was okay in my spiritual and private life, but the work realm, it was absolutely not allowed in that zone of my life. It didn't belong there. It wasn't part of the conditioning I received about that's how you can navigate work, that's how you can figure out what it is you want to do. You know, so many of my clients come to me, ask, you know, they want to know what's their dream work, or what business can I start, or what's my purpose, or they want to make a difference of some kind. And it's like, you can't figure it out in your head, you have to intuit it. And intuition to me is tied with action. It's like, if you get a gut instinct to go somewhere and do something, even if it makes no logical sense, probably especially if it makes no logical sense, but your heart wants it, follow it and do it. That would be my biggest tip, because the number of times I haven't done that and I've wished I had listened to an instinct. Here's another one for the group as well. Raise your hand if you've ever had a situation where you knew you had an instinct and you didn't follow it and something negative happened. Yeah. So more times than not, our intuition is correct. And even when it's not correct, it usually gives us an insight or something that we need to know. So that would be my little bit of thought and reflection on it. Does anyone want to pick up the thread from there? Go ahead, Polly. Unmute. I'll unmute you.
Right, that's better. Sorry, it was just blocking my screen. One other thing I wanted to say about the intuition is, and the thing that stopped me using it was my belief that someone else's explanation of what it should look like was what it was going to look like. So my intuition had been talking to me for decades before I understood what it was. And I was expecting it to turn up in a particular way. And it was the most mundane, silly thing that flipped it for me and made me understand that how I actually access my intuition is unique to me. So it's about being aware to it. And I will share you because it's just the most, and you'll see how insanely obvious it becomes. So I was getting myself into a right state about the fact that I couldn't access my intuition. I mean, I was already doing the work that I was doing, but I didn't feel that I could access it. And I was like, but I can't hear, I can't see, you know, it was all of this. And I was telling myself I wasn't getting it. And one day I went to set up to do my work, and I wanted to put my aromatherapy diffuser on. And I picked up an oil I had never used in the diffuser before and thought, okay, and it wasn't even, I didn't have a conscious thought. I just picked it up, put it in. And as I sat down, I thought, that's interesting. Why did I choose that one? And I happened to be feeling like really sort of blocked and frustrated that day. And the oil I had picked up when I looked it up was for release of frustration. And I went, and it was just one of those moments when, because Nicola said, when things land, they land. And it was just, it landed for me. And I just went, I don't need to hear or see or anything else. It's just that knowing for me. That's how I access my intuition. So I think the thing I want to say to everybody is that how your intuition shows up is completely unique to you. And if you just allow yourself the space to listen and be aware of what's going on, you will find how it shows up for you.
Nicola, it looks like you want to come forward.
Yeah, just yeah, I mean, I think for a long time, well, I didn't even think about kind of intuition as a concept. It's not something that I think generally we're taught to do, to listen to our intuition. Actually, you know, I believe we're taught, for me, it's about trusting yourself. And we're kind of taught, conditioned not to trust ourselves and always be looking outside for the answers. And when I did kind of start to learn about intuition, I thought it was only for certain people who had certain gifts. A lot of when I started this journey, a lot of the people that I was coming into contact with, they had these they were able to connect with their intuition in these really like detailed ways, and they'd have all of this information coming through. And I'd be like, oh my goodness, like I just can't imagine being able to do that. It's obviously not for me. But very similarly to Polly, like for me, it's my intuition is like a felt sense. I just know, and I don't have to think about it. I don't even need to do anything in particular for it to come through. It does feel quite mundane. So sometimes we do discount that sense of knowing. And I live with an engineer, my husband's an engineer. So if I'm kind of getting this intuitive, if I know something, I just know it. And I kind of don't need evidence, don't need research. It's like, I just know. And that drives him insane because he's like, but why? And, you know, what is your evidence for this? Why are you thinking this? But it's just been a process of like cultivating self-trust. And my evidence is that when I follow that inner knowing, like whether it's something small or something big, even if it doesn't unfold in the way that I've expected it to, like my mind is expected to, there's always magic there. So I've learned to kind of trust that, even if it doesn't look the way that I thought it was going to look, like when I'm following that kind of sense of knowing that it's going to take me where I need to go.
I'm laughing at your point about your how you describe an engineering brain. I'm like, oh yeah, that's so me. But you know what I've learned over the years is that that use of the logic in the brain can be super, super useful, but I would say it's absolutely intuition first, logic second. If you're wondering how do you choose, that's the way to do it. Intuition first.
Yeah. Well, I think it's the reason that we kind of came together, myself and my husband. We kind of complement each other in that way, or we've learned to do that. It's been a process, but I met him like at the beginning of this kind of journey when I just made the decision to leave corporate. So I think we learn a lot from each other, but it's allowing both of those rather than making one right and one wrong. Yeah.
Thanks, Nicola. Maria, can I bring you in next? I'll just oh, you've done it.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. Well, I mean, being from a construction background as well, it's like, intuition in the sense that we're talking about it, it never seemed to sort of come into things. But I think it would be a couple of things I wanted to say. One, it would be really interesting for people to start to use intuition in their workplace. Because for me, my intuition, when I started to tap into that, when I started on my spiritual journey, was leading me away from my workplace because I knew it wasn't the right space for me. I wasn't destined to do that for the rest of my life. I was destined to do what I'm doing now. But I think it would be really interesting to hear about if people have used their intuition at work and how that's kind of impacting on their day-to-day life. Sort of if they can bring in some sort of meditation practice or something like that, and see the difference that it makes to like the results that they're getting, especially if you feel like you're working somewhere where you feel like you're in your flow, like you're doing really good work. Like, could intuition and learning how to tap into your intuition really kind of like enhance that and like take you farther? But the other thing about intuition as well, and when you don't follow it, sometimes there is that kind of conflict between your logical brain and your intuition, and I think everybody's different with that as well. And maybe it is that construction engineering, like logical part of the brain that sort of kicks in sometimes, and sometimes you feel like you want to control how things happen, and that goes back to what Polly was saying about the mundane. Like, just something simple can make all of the difference, but sometimes we put something out there but we feel like we want to control it, like we want to control how it comes back to us, what we want to control how it happens. but that's like when you start to paddle upstream, and when you're sort of moving away from your intuition, and you start kind of, you know, coming up with blocks and things like that. So so I think it's important to sort of step out of the logical and into the heart, really, and into the body and the feeling, I think.
I love that. Yeah. So often our body talks to us, right? And we don't listen to it. You know, if you're getting a tight shoulders, or this is where it starts in the neck and the shoulders, and then it comes down. Some people it starts in the lower back, but the lower back's very much connected with our upper neck here. So these are little signs that we're taking on tensions, that we're not listening to the flow of life, to the way that is the path of least resistance, but we resist it with the logic, for sure. You know, in the group we've also had a comment that I want to touch on, because someone has said it's very true. Oh, hang on, sorry, I'm a little bit ahead. Someone said that they followed their instincts when they sold their car and packed up all their belongings and went off sailing, and people thought they were crazy. And the point that I want to pick up on is this point about being crazy. If people are calling you crazy, you are absolutely doing the right thing. Like, that's how you know you're expanding, because you're pushing other people's limits. They wouldn't know to be able to do that. And that feeling, if you've experienced that before, look for that feeling continuously. Really, really use it. I want to bring in Tonia next, if that's all right, because you know, money is one of these subjects that is often seen as being in the logical realm for a lot of people. And certainly for many of us, the idea of intuition and money together can be a little bit of a paradox, I might say, or a bit of a shock to the system for some people. So, Tonia, can you talk to us a little bit about that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And also just talking about intuition, where it's this intuition versus logic. And that has always been my battle. And I've always had a story with money, but for the first, which I shared in the work experience, like the first, it's more than half of my life, I only ran on logic. Like there was no intuition. I was in money, and I was very much so subscribed to a very logical world. And I also look at intuition and intuition and logic as like the masculine and the feminine. You know, they also have very similar components. And so in the money world and being in corporate, I followed very masculine characteristics, because that's what I thought I had to follow, is this, you know, the patriarchal kind of standpoint of only, and, you know, even what Nicola says, the engineering mind of everything being based off of evidence. And so for a really long time, I was very disconnected from my intuition. And it did come through very naturally, like Polly had mentioned. And I knew that it was there because I followed it every so often. But I actually blocked my intuition intentionally, because I was so afraid of my power. And I was so afraid into stepping into a new arena, like when it comes to money, being like, hey, so I don't believe that everyone is right with this. Like everything that's being taught about money is actually incorrect. And at that point, I still wasn't, like, my spiritual journey really started when I was 30 years old. And so I didn't know that all of this existed, you know, and the other thing is intuition. I know for me was very scary, because as Nicola said too, I thought intuition were people who were psychic, clairvoyance, read tarot cards, witchy stuff, wooey stuff, like this very like, oh, it's selective to few. And really our intuition is what Maria said. It's when we connect to our heart. Like that's it. It's choosing to go from our head to our heart. And it's the same thing with money. Like money, just like I labeled all these other things that people use for their intuition, money is just a tool as well. But it has been used as a logical tool to sort of control and everything else. But if we just tap into our intuition, money comes in and supports us. So it's what you said, Holly, in the very beginning. It's super important to first follow your intuition to know what you want, and then use the logic to bring in the financial literacy pieces to support you with money. I mean, there's some really good stuff out there that is being taught that I'm not saying throw away, but heart first, money afterwards, and learning all of those things. And I feel like that's not what's being taught out in the world. It's a very much so scarcity mindset. And from a mindset of scarcity, we come from fear, doubt, worry, and that's not where our intuition is. And the other thing is that I, feel is like I was very much so attached to my masculine. And it's when I decided to open up into my feminine and to feel safe, that it was safe for me to be in my feminine, and strength of vulnerability, like kindness, compassion, that my intuition really opened up for me, and that I was allowed to use my heart. And it does take courage and everything else to do that, but it's connecting to the heart that I really saw that. And, you know, when it comes to money too, you'll always hear so often about, you know, giving and give first and then you receive, because it is all about the exchanging of energy. And it's knowing that, you know, if you keep a closed fist, nothing is going to come in and go out. But if you keep your hands open in giving and receiving, that flow is open. And so the same thing goes with money. But again, it's in a scarcity mindset, in a patriarchal world, in a very controlling, not evidence-based world, it's very hard to just come from that place of intuition, but it's actually what money wants. It's very joyful, it's very playful. It's a way to say thank you. It's a way to really bring joy in, but it's for us to now start bringing the story in and having our own courage to be crazy enough to say, I don't believe that's the way. I actually believe that, what was the story? Quitting my job and going sailing is the way to do it. And you start to realize that's actually how you do it. And so embrace the crazy, because that's where your intuition is.
Embrace the crazy. Can I quote you on that?
Sure can.
There's a couple of things that you mentioned there, Tonia, that I just want to go into a little bit deeper, because I think they're quite interesting points. So the first one was, you mentioned you were afraid of your power. Can you tell us a little bit more? Like, I know that so many women experience this. I think men experience it too as well. So
Yes.
they fear going over the acceptable point, becoming too violent, too imposing. But for women, for me, I know in myself, it's certainly been a journey of feminine is weak. That's the association. Is there anything like that I was just curious, can you tell us a bit more about being afraid of your power and see what comes?
Oh, absolutely. And I just want to hit on one thing that you just mentioned too, about the masculine and the feminine, that when I'm speaking of them, I'm not talking about male or female.
That was going to be my next point.
Yeah, I'm talking about the characteristics that are behind them. So there could be, you know, a man who's also feeling like they want to tap into their feminine side, and it's not a male or female. They're about a certain, and you can look them up, like masculine characteristics, feminine, and just see what those are. So just to make that distinction between the two when I'm speaking about them. But for me, it was about how strong my intuition actually is. Like, I didn't realize how much I followed it. And when I do, I get things very easily, like manifesting. Like, I say I want something and instantly it was there. But if it wasn't coming from a place of my heart, sometimes I would also be complaining, and then I would get what I was complaining about. So I was also very afraid to know that how much I am in control of my surroundings and what happens in my life. And then not being able to stand from the victim standpoint of like, oh no, I can't have that because this is standing in my way, versus, well, the reality of it is that I'm the thing standing in my way. It's not that thing. I'm just afraid to confront that right now. There was also very much so, I thought vulnerability was a weakness. I thought crying was a weakness. It's very much so that mentality of, and again, that's the be a man, or like, you know, you have to be tough, or if you're in the corporate world feeling you have to compete with that, and it's just like, don't show emotion, you know, don't cry, don't, you know, into it, like there's no place for that. And so strength really showed up as just, and you'll hear these terms, doing whatever it takes, getting the job done. And little by little, I'm starting to realize like, no, it's actually ease that has it go through. It's actually, if you have to really push that hard sometimes, maybe it's because that door is blocked for a reason, and that's not the door you're supposed to be going through. I mean, there's an either or of it, but I was just starting to really see that there were rules that I was subscribed to, and I was subscribed to them because of, you know, family dynamics. I grew up in a, you know, very the Catholic church we followed. So I was subscribed to a lot of rules that I actually intuitively don't believe in, or that I don't really think are the way forward. And so stepping into my power also meant that I would have to, you know, be disagreeing with my family, be disagreeing with, you know, the church, with some of the things that they teach, and disagreeing. And so And it felt very lonely. Like, you know, are people going to come at me for having a different viewpoint and from turning away from the herd? And so there was a lot of things about not stepping into my power that I had all of these beliefs around, but it was the opposite. The moment I stepped into my power with my heart and not from a fear place, I was actually embraced, and it was refreshing. And because I wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone or change minds, I was just showing up authentically as myself. And because of that, it just responded, and it actually became very, can't think of the word, but embracing. And so it almost then gives other people permission to be their authentic selves when I wasn't trying to prove myself anymore. And I was just, my journey was just to be more of me and to be honest with myself and who that is, regardless of what I'm surrounded by.
I love that. I so love that. And I think as well, you touched on another couple of great points there. And what I'm really reminded of is how when we start to step into our power and into ourselves, a lot of the fear is around other people and what other people think. And what I'd say I've really learned is actually you've got to learn to put yourself first, not in a selfish way, but in a selflessly selfish way, because if you've got to be the one to decide what's right for you, what your boundaries are, what's okay and what's not in your life. And also I'm reminded of something, you know, I have a client who was in a car accident, and we had a discussion in one of our sessions, and I said to her, you know, what were you thinking about right before you had the crash? And she said, I was thinking about, I won't say the exact words, but she was thinking about how she didn't want to be doing this and how she needed to turn around or she needed to stop. And then her words were, yeah, I needed to stop. And I was like, well, hello, this is how we create our universe. Where we put energy is what we end up creating. And so often, you know, people talk about this phrase manifesting and positivity. And I'm not really a huge fan of some of that stuff, because I don't think that what people tend to do is think in their head, what do I need and want, and then try to manifest it. And it doesn't work that way. The heart absolutely has to be in it. And you have to be able to hold a solid sense of clarity and focus towards that thing that you want. Because if you have a mixed vibration, if you're like thinking, I'm like 60% wanting that, but 40% wanting something else, you're going to get something weird show up for you, or you'll get that stalling feeling of like, well, you know, the universe doesn't know what to attract to you, if you know, in that kind of language. And so our thoughts really create our reality, and so do our emotions. Emotion is emotion, electrons in motion, energy in motion, you know. So our thoughts create our emotions, and they're all linked. And I just want to bring Anne-Marie in on this, because I know that RTT is based on some of these things. Can you talk to us about how the mind and the emotions link in that way?
Yes, of course. We usually say, I was looking for that sentence to put it there, which is where focus goes, energy flows, which is basically the more we focus on something, the more it tends to really happen somehow. So it makes all sense what you're saying. Like, she said to herself that she had to stop, and somehow things happen to make it, you know, happen. And it's not always the greatest way, but that's what usually tends to happen. So yeah, you know, we usually, like what you were saying a bit before with regards to the way the body reacts. Our body usually tend to adapt to what we think. So depending on what happens in our mind, then our body will try to match it all the time. So that's why sometimes the body makes us stop one way or another, so that we can just start to understand that something's happening, and that we really need to change something around us in our life. You know, from all of what you were sharing, I was really thinking about myself, because I always had the impression that I had chosen my path somehow, like my work and all of that. And today I look back and I really look at it like I was running everywhere. Like I was running around all the time. I never had time for me, never had time to think. And today I feel like I was just running from myself somehow, you know, like no time, always busy, things to do. At work, it was the same, working late hours. And today I look at this like, okay, you followed a path that really made yourself never stop to start to think, to see if you had any instinct, anything that you could do differently. It was like automatic mode, totally. And so that's when I see what you were saying, like it's so important to listen to ourselves, but it's not something usual. It's not something that nobody talks to you about that. It's not something that, you know, that's usual. We tend to start thinking about it. I think that some people, you know, grow up in families where it's usual, so it's easier. But a lot of us, they had to, you know, fall somehow to start thinking, okay, maybe it's not the right way, or maybe it's not the only way. And that's when we started to look for information, look for something different to do. And what I feel like is everything changed for me when I decided to question what I was living, first of all, if it was the only way. And also going towards what Tonia was saying, like stop time and understand, well, what are my objectives? And it can be around money, but it can be also around, you know, which house I would love to live in, you know, which city I would like to live in, where I would feel like I would be my real self. So it's really stopping time and taking a piece of paper and writing down, you know, your objectives, what would be your, you know, desired life, or, you know, around all of that. And I feel like when I did it, somehow I sent a message. I don't know where, but it went. And bits by bits, things happened, and they kept happening because it was clearer for me. So it's not about the paper. It's not about throwing words in the air, right? Talking to the universe or whatever. It's really the thing like, okay, if it's clear for me, if it's clear in my mind, if it's clear inside, then the outside will have to match it. So somehow we have to stop time and really question ourselves. What do I want for myself? And that's when it comes to what you were saying, putting yourself first, because we are always running around trying to take care of everybody. And we don't really, you know, think of, okay, but what's important for me? What would I like to do? What's the best job I would like to do? Where would I feel, you know, like I'm helping people, but I'm helping as well, myself as well, where I would feel I would grow myself. So it's really like, I think it's really important. And I say it to a lot of people, you know, stop time, take a piece of paper and just write down, you know, where you would like to be 6 months from now, and where would you like to be 3 years from now? And we should sometimes look at that paper and, you know, update it, because things can change. We don't have to want always the same thing or whatever. But if we are clear what we want for ourselves, things will change for sure. But we never stop time. We never ask ourselves. We never do that. We just keep on, you know, waking up the next day, doing exactly as the day before, and thinking that things will change. But they won't change. If we don't change in the first place, tomorrow won't change. So we need to, I think that's it. Stop
So
time
just
and
everyone raise your hands if you've been through that that moment of, I need to think about me and what I want. Yeah. And was it, raise your hand if it was around your corporate job previously? Cool. Full house every time. I love that. You know, so this is like, I think this is something that everybody goes through, where we grow up with these ideas of what things should be, who we should be, what should make us happy. And actually, we never stop to actually ask ourselves, what's going to make me happy? And I think, you know, I love what you had to say there, Anne-Marie, and you were talking about objectives and plans, very similar to some of the stuff Maria covered. But what I would also say is it can be so much simpler than that. If you're having, particularly if you're having a really, really, really difficult time or a lot of challenges all hitting you at once, one of the things that I've found is super useful is, it is a little bit of my engineering brain here, is just to almost break down a specification. So rather than try to say, right, I want this dream house and I want that perfect job, leave the solution up to fate or up to happenstance. But if you get crystal clear on the specification, I'll give you an example of this. Me and my other half wanted to move house, and we had a rough idea of a couple of areas where it could be. And we sat down and we wrote a list together of what do we want in our home. And it was things like, we want to be able to walk out of the front door into nature and go for lots of different lovely, amazing walks. We want to be able to grow some vegetables. We want to be within walking distance of a pub and a local community hub of some form. And, you know, the list went on. I won't go through them all, but literally within a week of us writing that list, we went out and had a look at some places. We found the perfect place, and we knew that it was the perfect place because we'd been through that exercise. And so when it showed up, there was no hesitation. Our energy was clear. And, you know, where I'm living right now, it was already about to be signed for. We'd visited on the Sunday, and the guy was like, who was the landlord, was like, oh, look, you know, I'll show you around, but somebody's already gone through all the process. They just have to sign the paperwork. It should be done by Wednesday. And so we had a look and we were like, oh God, this is so amazing. We're gutted, you know. And then I said, look, give us your number or we'll give you ours just in case, because if it ever comes up again in the future, you can let us know. And then I messaged him on the Friday and he goes, you're never going to believe it. You know, it hasn't gone through. And it turned out there'd also been another couple to look at it who'd been sent to somewhere else locally instead. And if, you know, if they hadn't been sent there, it wouldn't have been available and so on. So when you get clear, amazing things happen. And I know it sounds unrealistic. I know it sounds crazy, but honestly, this is what happens in life. So I just want to put a question out to the audience, because we've got quite a few people watching, and just ask you guys, how do you experience your intuition? And do you find that you block it yourself? Do you find that it flows naturally? Have you had experiences where you've listened to your intuition and things have all worked out? That hunch, that gut instinct, whatever you want to call it. Or have you had situations where you didn't listen to that little tingle, that little bell going off in the back somewhere, and had a negative situation? I'd just love to hear from you about what your experiences of intuition have been, just before we close. And the final thing that I think has come through over the course of the 8 weeks, and also feels like a good tying up point for where the next couple of talks in the group over the next few weeks, is I think part of the work is around opening up not just our intuition, but also our emotional self. In some languages, that could be classed as the more feminine characteristics, as Tonia had talked about earlier. But for me, it's much more around when we close down our emotion, we lose a part of ourself. In some tribal cultures and ancient medicines, they talk about losing a piece of your soul when you don't process your emotion, or when you make choices that aren't in your highest alignment, in your best interests, essentially. And I know for me that one of the big lessons has been to try and identify my emotions beyond mad, sad and glad, and know that frustration is a really powerful transformational energy. Like if you feel frustrated, it's because there's something you have to learn and change and do differently in order to open you up. So often emotions like guilt and shame are proxies for other things as well. It's holding on to beliefs that aren't your own, or it's a proxy for us to kind of appear strong and powerful when actually we feel really hurt and a bit maybe sad or disappointed inside. And so I'd just like each of you just to speak. I'm going to keep it short now because we're coming towards the end, just for 60 seconds around the topic of emotion and your experience of opening to your emotion and how that's evolved you and changed your journey in some way. So I'll open the floor. Just put your hand up if you want to go first, or unmute. Tonia.
I think so much of my emotions, what they've done is once I've learned to accept and embrace them, it just showed me how they're actually a gift that just want to have me reclaim parts of myself. So whether it's good or bad, I don't even classify them as good, bad. Like, I don't judge what it is, right? It could be okay if it's bad or sad, but I don't judge them. I know that there is a message here for me to reclaim power of myself and to know more about myself. So in whatever form it comes, it's always a gift that's given to me once I've learned, like, the emotions are the superpower.
Yeah, I can totally resonate with that as well. Don't judge it. I grew up in a household where negative emotions, or what gets labeled as negative emotions, actually were not allowed. And to the extent that in my childhood, it was really like myself was being constantly not validated, constantly devalued. So I was learning this lesson of, Holly, your emotions, your thoughts, and your experiences don't count. Always go to authority. Trust what other people say more than you. Other people are more intelligent than you, more beautiful than you, more whatever. We all have our things. So yeah, and this this is something that's so important to grasp, is that there is no negative and positive. It's all here as an opportunity to learn. And this is something that often gets called like the duality, where we see these two sides of a scale. And so often in life, we're saying to ourselves, should I do this or should I do that? And I'd say, if you've got a choice of two, see if you can find a third. Maybe the third is the way. Maybe the balance is what you're looking for. Who would like to go next after Tonia? Nicola.
I feel like emotion, it brings together all the threads that we've been talking about in a lot of ways, because for me, it's been a journey of, like you, Holly, there were only certain emotions really that were encouraged and celebrated when I was growing up. So I kind of learned I had to be a particular way and just show the kind of nice emotions. So a big part of my journey has been about making space for emotions that weren't encouraged for a big part of my life, and I think generally are not encouraged for women, actually. Certainly things like anger and rage, where there's a lot of energy there, but we're not allowed to express it. There can be a lot of learning there. So it kind of ties in with my intuition for me, because I experience it as a felt sense. And part of my kind of practice now is just to be checking in with my body and noticing what physical sensations are there and what emotions might be trying to talk to me, really. And I think it ties in with our power. This is where our power is, when we allow ourselves to be fully expressed and express from all of the emotions that are present from us, not just the ones that we're told are acceptable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that line there about where our power is, I'd say when we are repressing any part of our emotion, we are giving our power away to other forces. Anytime when we're not in the space of being 100% us, it opens up a space for something else to come in, something that isn't you, the not you. And I still give my power away in all kinds of ways. And for me, boundaries have been a big part of that. Actually learning to go, hang on, I'm allowed to have this. This was my experience, whether anyone else agrees with me or not. This is how I personally experienced it on an emotional level, and it's okay for me to say that. And when you process your emotion in that way, it opens up space for you to believe in yourself, and B, for you then to create boundaries. And a boundary isn't like a wall. A boundary is like saying, this is what I'm going to accept into my life, and this is what I'm not. And you're perfectly entitled to do that. You know, it's a bit like if somebody is coming at you, or if someone is bullying you, if someone is say physically hitting you, you're not going to let them keep coming towards you that way. So if something doesn't serve you, it's better to keep it further away. And the things that do serve you, raise you up, encourage you, help you to be more you, to relax into you and feel like amazing for being you, rather than what a lot of us do, especially in relationships. I think this is a great place to work with this idea, is in relationships. We can so often feel slightly ashamed of bits of our body or things that are going on that are about us, where we think we don't live up to someone else's expectations. But actually, you can work with that and practice. You know, when you have a great relationship, that other person helps you open to that. They're like, you know, the things you dislike about yourself, they help open you to loving them, without necessarily just saying, oh yeah, you know, you don't need to think that way. It's much more nurturing, is the way I would describe it. Who would like to go next on the topic of emotion? Maria?
Yeah, I've learned a lot about myself recently. I've been doing some work. There's a book called Positive Intelligence by Shazad Shamim. And I've been doing this. He did this kind of 6-week sort of program for coaches. And you learned about, so he talks about saboteurs. So like when you are feeling emotion, he says that quite often that's your saboteur kind of kicking in, and there's about 10 different ones. And I did this analysis, and I mean, it made sense to me, because I think, so one of them was a pleaser, and that totally made sense to me because of, like, you know, having a role as sort of peacekeeper in the past in the family, but also like wanting to please people, not wanting to like upset people, like, you know, almost sacrificing myself sometimes, which is stuff that I've done in the past. Another one was avoider, and another one was, so my top 3 were avoider, controller, and pleaser. And that kind of made a lot of sense to me from an emotional perspective, because that's when I would, if all of those were kicking in, that's when I would experience paralysis and I wouldn't be able to do anything. And it just made such a lot of sense, you know, about when I've been feeling emotion, and the different sort of saboteurs. And what he says is, like, when you're in that moment, you know, when your sort of saboteurs are kicking in, he uses a technique, he calls it PQ reps or whatever, but it's positive, so PQ is positive intelligence, but it's basically practicing mindfulness. So he says about doing things like, you know, rub 2 fingers together and like feel the ridges of your fingers, like focus on your breath, like basically bring yourself back into the present. And then he talks about bringing in your inner sage to sort of, you know, acknowledge the fact that you've been hijacked, and sort of bringing you back into the present, and how you can sort of like sort of work through that and let it go. And it's been fascinating to learn that about myself.
Yeah, I mean, the ability to stay in the present moment is so key, because old patterns and triggers can bring out the saboteur in us, the part of us that wants to keep us small. And, you know, it's the brain doing its job. It wants to keep us safe. You know, there is a reason for it, but at the same time, it no longer serves us. It was great when you're a child and you didn't have a choice, but as a grown woman, we have to mature and be responsible, and actually be able to stay in the moment, stay centered, and not get pulled into the amygdala and all of those past moments being re-experienced right now in the present. So thanks for that, Maria. And Maria, I could see you nodding a lot, so I think we'll go to you next.
Yeah, I think it's all about the conditioning, right? I think when the best thing to do is basically when we react, we should just look at ourselves as if we were the spectator, you know? Okay, you reacted like that, and just, you know, put a little smile, say, okay, is that you? Is that not you? Is it the way you want to react? Is it not? And that's when all begin. If you just stop time and ask yourself the question and don't, you know, keep on reacting automatically, just question yourself. Is that who I want to be? Is it me? Is it not me? Is it something I've seen, I've learned, whatever? Just stop time for a few seconds and just, you know, put a smile on and who's this? Is it you or not? And I think a lot of things will start from there, really understanding if we are being ourselves and the way we want to really be, or if we are playing another role.
I love that so much. And could you just type into the group those questions that you just said there? So it was about just take a moment, stop, and ask yourself, is this me, is this not? Just so people can remember it and reinforce it. And Polly, let's come over to you now. You'll need to unmute again.
It is quite hard to follow on from that. Am I still muted?
No, you're fine.
No, sorry, I couldn't see. It's quite hard to follow on from that. Yeah, I mean, it's just all of that just made so much sense to me, and I think, you know, similar to several of you, that there are certain ranges of emotions that were frowned upon when I was growing up. You know, so they were ranges of emotion that were tapped down, and there was a limit on them. You know, to feel upset. You know, there was a level above which it was not acceptable to feel upset. So. One of the things that I found when I first started looking at this, coming back to what both Maria and Anne-Marie were saying about being in the present moment and of having that objectivity, one of the things that I found about emotion was that I was terrified to let my emotions out because I didn't know how it was going to feel. Now, I can remember feeling like that, but I cannot remember the feeling of it now, because actually there was no great deluge. There was no moment of losing control. And the freedom to actually acknowledge that, even objectively say, that's my emotion, exactly what Anne-Marie was saying, to say, you know, oh, hang on a second, is this my emotion? And not judge it, you know, as I think everyone sort of said very similar things. It's not judge it, you know, it's just that's what's coming out, being aware of it and saying, okay, well, what does that tell me about how I'm feeling? What does it tell me about where I've come from? What does it tell me about where I'm going to? So it's what I've learned to shorten it right down, because I could just, you know, what everyone said is fantastic. So to shorten it down is to not be afraid of my emotions.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fear of emotion is a big hold on a lot of us, and on so many people. And what I see as the pattern is it takes more energy to avoid that emotion than it does to actually go into it. And we are so fearful. And then the moment we go into it, it's like, you know, I always think of like a safe with all of these locks like this, and you're really pressing hard to keep everything locked up. And then as soon as you open it up, it's like, oh, I can breathe, and like, oh, that wasn't so bad. And okay, so maybe there's something for me to see there, or maybe there's nothing. So often for me, you know, there's nothing there on the other side of it. It's like, oh, what was that all about, you know? So the last few comments from the group just before we finish are going back to the questions that I asked around intuition, where Lindsay says that she experiences intuition as a thought or idea that I can't shake off. It takes hold and it grows until I can't ignore it and have to investigate it. Yeah, just raise your hand if you have that experience. The reason I'm getting everyone to raise their hand, by the way, is just so that people know what intuition is and how different people experience it. And then Helen Maria says she's not entirely sure if she's in touch with her intuition. She might be missing something or more shut down than she thought. Any ideas? And this sparked a little thought for me, which was just to do a very short exercise on how to tap into your intuition. And I know we've ran over by about just coming up to 10 minutes. Is everybody okay to stay for a few more moments? If you do need to leave, feel free to just switch off.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Nicola.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah.
And so we'll just do this very brief exercise, and it's something that I learned as a way to tap into my intuition and to actively use it. So whenever I have a question in life, whenever I'm not quite sure what I should do, whenever I have that inner conflict of being like, I'm not sure if that's truly me or if that's just you know, the not me part thing going on, or an old pattern. So all you do is you just close your eyes. I'm just going to put myself onto speaker view just to make it a bit simpler and so no one feels too self-conscious. And all I invite you to do is, oh, we've got Polly on the screen instead of me. I'm not sure why that is. Okay, I think maybe we'll stay on speaker view. All you need to do is just close your eyes for a few moments. So if we all close our eyes and just take a deep breath in through the nose and exhale out through the mouth. And once more, inhale through the nose and exhale through the mouth, pressing the feet into the floor wherever you're sat just now. And we're just going to begin by imagining that you are a star, that you are pure golden, silver, white light. And you can imagine this visually. You can imagine it as just a knowing, as a sense. Maybe you can feel it. Whatever sense works for you, just go with that in this. So just imagine or just know that you are a star. We are all made of stardust, the same elements, chemical elements that make up the stars created your body, the universe. And therefore, we are totally connected to all things, all beings, everything that is within creation. And that you can tap into that, to the knowing, to the knowledge, to your intuition at any time that you wish. And so we're going to set an intention together now, which is just to, we're going to ask the question of set the intention to know what's blocking us most from our intuition right now. And all you need to do next is to ask your mind, feel into that intention to know what's most blocking you in your intuition, and bring a picture to mind in your mind's eye. If you're not visual, you might feel this as a sensation in a part of your body. You might see a symbol, you might hear a noise or become acutely aware of something in your environment. I just want you to notice that for a few minutes and look at it. Bring a super clear image or sensation or knowing, even a word it may come up as, around the thing that is most blocking you in terms of your intuition. And when you've got an image in mind, you can just open your eyes and come back to the space right now. And so, great, all the teachers have got their eyes open. Just raise your hand if you've got a symbol or if you could tap into something. Okay, everyone, that's great. And if you could do that in the group as well, just give me a comment, say yes just now if you got a symbol, an image, a sensation, and just type into the group yes and what it was. That would be super helpful. So all you need to do with that symbol is then work out what that symbol means to you, and whatever is the meaning of it is something that you naturally relate to. It will be the first thing that comes to your mind. And so one of the things that I do is I use dream moods a lot because of the symbolism in it. And I find that I can type in a word into Dream Moods and it will tell me what that symbol means. And so I would just very briefly like to invite one person, one of the teachers, to just talk about your symbol, just so that people can feel into this exercise a little bit more. Would anybody be willing to do that? Polly, just unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry, the reason I was going to say that, because I'm sure everybody's got really good things to do, is that my symbol or my picture was of a parasol.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I wanted to share that because my intuition speaks to me purely in imagery, which takes a lot of interpretation. So it's very simple that I'm, you know, if you actually think about the purpose of a parasol is to actually shield you from the sun. So actually that's the thing that's blocking me. So I just, you know, as a very simple thing, it's just think about it, how does it show up and what does that mean? And if that doesn't ring true for you, then sit with it a bit longer and see what else comes through, because there's always a meaning. It just might take a bit of digging.
That's it. And also, you know, in terms of the digging, so often you can get one symbol and then you can say, okay, when you know what that means, give me more clarity and go back through the exercise again. And just make sure that you set the intention very clearly at the beginning to know what it is you want to know. And this is an exercise that you can use throughout the day, throughout your week, whenever you would like. So yeah, some people in the group have said yes, but they haven't given their symbol, but it's great to know that you have had that experience. So we come to the end of our amazing 8-week journey. I am so grateful to each of you beautiful, brilliant beings that have joined us for the lessons. Just for the audience, we are deciding as a group where to take this next. So we are putting out a survey and would love to get your responses on that. And if you have enjoyed these lessons, they are available for £33. You can get a copy, you can keep them and have access to them forever, for as long as you like, as well as the workbook and all of the worksheets and some extra tools as well are provided within that. And that £33 simply goes to charity. We're not making any money from it. And our intention was just to help women and ideally support a women's charity with the money that gets raised. So if you're interested, please do that. If you don't know where to go, I'm going to post a link tomorrow. You can also email me at holly@evolving.careers. Thank you all as the audience for joining us on this journey as well. You have made it what it is with all of your brilliant questions and all of your insights and sharing. And I love how much the group has opened up over time. Tomorrow night, we continue with a new set of teachers. And tomorrow we have Anne Whitehouse, who is, take care, Tonia. Thank you for being here. And Anne Whitehouse is all about pulling back your power. And she's going to be talking about how you can transform your confidence, because this is one of the themes that has come up in the groups. We're also going to be having a session all about influencing others, which is quite useful in so many walks of life, in your job, in business. And the main thing is the week after that, we are going to be hosting a resilience circle, which is going to be live on Zoom, where you can all join us and we will be interacting live. And this session is all about how do we stay resilient as we emerge out of the pandemic, as we maybe go back to situations that we don't want to go back to, or maybe we're going back and that's a great thing for us, but we're having other challenges. So it's a place to come and share, and we're going to be exploring specifically emotions in that session. So if you would like to explore that, and this invite goes out to the teachers as well, as a huge thank you to you for being part of the group. I would love for you all to join us on that. And I will be posting in the group and emailing everybody about it soon. So a massive thank you, everybody. Any final words from the teachers?
Just to say thank you for, asking me to get involved with this, and well done on, having the vision to pull it together in the first place and trusting your intuition. So well done.
Thanks, Maria. I know I've said many times in this group that this has been an experiment in my intuition, because I just had this intuition to start a group, to do something. I didn't know where it would go. And, you know, you guys have just been so amazing showing up for it and sharing all of your wisdom. So thank you very much. Anne-Marie or Polly, were you going to talk? I can see you both unmuted.
You go, Anne-Marie.
I think we all grew from it. So thanks a lot to all of you, you know, teachers and everybody that participated in it. I think we all grew from it. So it's an excellent opportunity.
Yeah, I think the blessing of being a teacher or a coach or a, you know, a transformer of any kind is, you know, we learn so much from the people we interact with, from the people we help, from our clients. And I feel truly blessed to be in that privileged position of, you know, as I think it was, I can't remember if it was Anne-Marie or Maria who mentioned it earlier, but, you know, you work with a client and it brings your own things up and helps you go, oh, there's something for me there. So yeah, totally grateful to the audience.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful to all the people who participated, but I'm very grateful to you for pulling it together, because as we started this session earlier on, you were talking about listening to your body and I was yawning away. And the reason I was yawning away was because there was just this amazing sense with all of us together of that, the completeness of it, that we'd all been through the things that we were talking about, and that we'd all come out the other side of it. And it was just this, I was just yawning away, this sort of like this wonderful sense of belonging that came from that. So that was a real privilege to feel. And I hope that everybody who's participated in this event has actually felt that as well.
Yeah, great words, Polly. Thank you so much for sharing those. And so there's one last thing to mention, which I almost forgot about, but I need to just cover, which is in the very start of this event of our first 8 weeks, I made a promise that somebody would win a 6-session coaching package with me. And I haven't been able to choose a person. So I am going to say to you, I would like, if you feel you are in need of this, I would like you to drop me an email, Holly, HOLLY, at evolving.careers. I will write it into this group as well. Or if Anne-Marie, if you're online, could you just type it in for me? It'd be amazing. Yeah. Holly at evolving.careers. And just drop me a few lines and say why you need it, because I want to work with someone who really feels that they are ready to transform, that they want to either change career, figure out their business, or just get more deeply in touch with themselves. Particularly if you want to do it in the realm of work and that area of your life, because that's where I'm most powerful, in the area of life, but it tends to trickle out into other areas of life as well. So just, there's no rules, just write whatever comes and just tell me why you should receive this gift. And I will then respond to everyone that applies and let you know who I'm moving forward with, whether you've won that or not, because I'd like to honour that prize that I offered at the beginning. So I look forward to hearing from you. I thank you all again. Thank you, my intuition, for making this happen. Thank you guys, teachers and coaches, for showing up for this, and thank you to the amazing audience. And I look forward to continuing over the next few weeks with a new fresh round of teachers and figuring out with these wonderful women where we go from here in this group. So thank you all, and have an amazing Sunday afternoon or evening, depending on where you are, and have a great week. I will see you tomorrow night, usual time, here in the group with Anne Whitehouse. And until then, have a great one. Bye all.
Bye everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.